Welcome to episode 7 of the John Shields case. This is the final episode, and we'll consider the involvement of John Swinney, the constituency MSP who worked on the case on behalf of John Shields, and who's now, of course, First Minister of Scotland. There's a lot of involvement from Mr. Swinney stretching way back, and he's initially hugely supportive. I'll give you a couple of examples, and then maybe you could sort of explain what the relationship was like and what he was doing for you. 2009 October, 23rd October 2009, letter from John Swinney to you. Dear John, thank you for passing me the material from the Mental Welfare Commission. I understand your frustration about this issue. As I have indicated to you, I think a number of minds were made up about how this case was going to be handled a long time ago, and unfortunately you've become a victim of that process. I think trying to get many of these organisations to admit their errors and folly will be extremely difficult. I will, however, give you whatever support I can to ensure that you are able to tackle the issues about which you are concerned. So, very positive, very much recognising that you've been wronged and that the agencies are in the wrong. And supported. The letter after letter ends, if there's anything else I can do, please let me know. So very supportive. So tell me about sort of early interaction with Mr. Swinney.
First interactions with John Swinney came in 2003 when we just moved up to Blairgowrie, and this was getting the help at the time to get John a care package. As then I was just getting appointed as John's guardian, and I phoned up and I knew that to get a care package for John had to be done through the local authorities. Not knowing the local authorities or having much to do with local authorities up here, contacted John Swinney, and it was a good few years later before I went back to Swinney again when it came trying to get a care package for John.
Right, and for the care package, I've been through the correspondence. It was a huge fight.
Oh, it was a battle, even for him.
And you were constantly rejecting what was offered by Perth and Kinross Council, and rejecting it, and the extent, size of that care package kept going up and up in huge bounds. I mean, what they were initially offering was maybe a quarter of the support that you finally got. So there was a huge battle. There was a lot of pressure put on you by Perth and Kinross Council to accept what was an offer, or lose it. Essentially, that was some of the correspondence. So, what was Mr. Swinney like during that? How supportive was he during that process?
Well, I must admit, he was supportive, but he didn't really get involved when it came to the financial side of it. That's where when you've got your care worker and your social worker involved, it's up to them to go forward. He did monitor it, and eventually it came to the stage where he had to step in.
Okay, so during that fight for the care package, the fight with Perth and Kinross Council, how helpful was John Swinney? How much was he involved, and how much support did he offer?
John Swinney would get involved if there was no movement on going forward to get the package. Your social workers and your support team for Perth and Kinross Council, they're the one that you're dealing with all the time, is getting a package that meets John's needs. The problem was trying to get a package to meet John's needs with Perth and Kinross Council then became a problem, because the needs were not being met. All they were doing was looking for a quick fix, quick buck, and walk away. That's what Perth and Kinross wanted. Part of the care package is, and the main reason for it is to get an amount of money that can be viable for John's life. He's living, getting out and about, doing whatever it is he likes best. And at that same point, it's meant to help myself and my wife go back to work. That's really what the package was, and it just was not meeting. And it didn't matter what the social workers, I think through the conversation we've had with social workers breaking down and crying and that sort of thing, is because these social workers that I had back then were pretty good, And they did fight, because they're the ones that come out to your home and do the assessments. They assess what John's needs are, what they think he's going to need, how they've got to meet the needs. Everybody will tell you the local authority must meet the needs of the adult. Perth and Canós Council never, ever want to meet the needs of the adult. It's what they think he needs, not his needs, what they think. That is the problem, and that's when you hear so many things about MSPs getting involved in the fights for the care package. You've heard a statement from Dina Scott, always went to MSPs. Always went to get somebody to bring in, because you had no choice. You had to do it that way.
And Mr. Swinney was helpful, yes? He
was helpful at that period, yeah. He knew what John was wanting. He knew what John needed, because he'd listened to us. We explained. One of the things I keep telling people was when you're trying to get your care package, it's not what I want, and it's not for what me and Janice want. It's what John wants, what John needs. That is it. And one thing that a lot of people forget as well is like, as soon as you accept, there's no going back. You know, that is what all you'll get. But so when you go to get a care package, when I got involved with Spain, when I went out to families, I told them, you fight for what you want for your child. I says, that's it. You'll get one shot at this. And then the council will sit there, and they will sit on that amount of money, because they think, okay, if we're going to pay that amount of money, we'll pay it, but we'll only pay it once. Don't come back to us again. That is the way Perth and Canós Council work. It's always been the way they work. Save money, no spend it.
So going through the correspondence, there's a lot of correspondence from Mr. Swinney and that. Basically all supportive of your position. And there's one in 26 February 2010 to Jim Martin, Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, where he takes the Ombudsman to task over something they have told you about Mr. Swinney's office. So he's been very defensive and protective of his own reputation and what he's doing. So he concludes, I'm sorry to have to write to you in these terms, but I'm deeply concerned the constituent about whom I have spoken to you personally, who I believe has been treated very badly by a public authority, has had information put to him by your office which can only have undermined his confidence in the way in which his case has been handled by his member of the Scottish Parliament. Okay, so even though he's defending himself, he's saying that you've been treated very badly. So he's very much in your corner. In April 2010, there's a letter from the Legal Aid Board to John Swinney. Dear Mr. Swinney, thank you for your letter of 31st March 2010 about John Shields. This application for civil legal aid has now been granted. A letter has been issued to Mr. Shields and his solicitor on 7th April 2010 confirming that he has civil legal aid to bring an action against North Lanarkshire Council for release of the documents that he needs for his claim on behalf of his son. So there's a lot in the file about this as well. So this is the time where you're pursuing information to various local authorities, including Perth and Canós Council and North Lanarkshire. You're trying to find out what actually happened to your son. And again, John Swinney's coordinating this. He's writing to people on your behalf. In the search for information, was he supportive?
He was supportive. You know, don't get me wrong. I know I knock the man now, but back then he seemed to be doing what he thought was right for me. You've heard some of his statements. He knew I was wrong by the local authorities. He knew my son had been abused. He knew that I was never going to stop. He knew that. And when it came to taking North Lanarkshire Council on that's a case which I won down in Hamilton Sheriff Court against North Lanarkshire Council. He was very supportive in that.
We're still in 2010 here. We've got a letter from John Swinney to you. Dear John, thank you for taking the time to meet me in my constituency office to discuss your case. As we discussed in our meeting, I feel that progressing your case through the legal system is the best way to bring this matter to a satisfactory conclusion. I am more than willing to be called upon as a witness to support your case. as I am well aware of the difficulties you've encountered with both Perth and Kinross and North Lanarkshire councils. As always, if you feel I can be of any assistance, please contact me.
Yeah.
So this is offering to be a witness basically against Perth and Kinross and North Lanarkshire Council. This is, really quite
dynamite.
proactive.
It was dynamite.
Now we come to a letter on 28th of September 2010 from Mary Fagan, Head of Social Work Services, North Lanarkshire Council, to John Swinney. So again, everything's going through John Swinney. He's very much got a coordinating role. Ms Fagan concludes, social work is keen to assist Mr Shields with these inquiries. It is regrettable that Mr Shields continues to be dissatisfied about the extent to which information has been provided by social work. In reviewing staff's efforts so far on his behalf, I have formed the view that social work has acted reasonably in meeting Mr Shields' demands. It's what they don't say. She doesn't say they've given you all the information. She says they've acted reasonably. We don't actually know what she means by reasonably. But my point is, here you've got John Swinney acting to push social work to give you information. He's engaged in correspondence. He's very active on your behalf. 21st October 2010, letter from Dr Lyons to John Swinney, MSP, as well. Now, Dr Lyons was that Mental Welfare Commission?
Yeah, I think he was in charge.
Yeah, so Mental Welfare Commission, so there's more correspondence then. So John Swinney's corresponding with a range of public bodies on your behalf. So 9th of December 2011, letter from John Swinney to you. Dear John, thank you for updating me about the report from the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission. As discussed, I have written to Jane Irvin, Chair of the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission, to ask what further opportunity you will have to challenge this report. I've also written to Lorna Jack, Chief Executive of the Law Society of Scotland, to ask what progress has been made with the conduct issue. To make a complaint against the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman, you have to visit the website, and it gives a website URL to make a complaint. I will be in touch as soon as I have a reply. So again, there's more public bodies he's dealing with. So he's dealing with, it must be close on a dozen different public bodies on your behalf. We get to December 2011. There's a letter from Jane Irvin, the Chair of the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission, to John Swinney, talking about the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission's deliberations and their report and your reply, and what the process is going to be. Could you tell us a little about that?
The process itself was, I can't remember what we were digging into to get information on, but I know we'd met with Shona Robinson, who at that time was involved with the Scottish Government, where we met her down in St Andrew's House. There was herself, me, my wife, my sister, and I think it was Sandra Brown for the Moira Anderson Foundation. And we were asking questions concerning issues to do with John and in the investigation into the cover-up of abuse. I think that's what this was all about. And Shona Robinson at that time had turned around and says that she was going to put forward people to investigate exactly what had went on with John. And that never materialised, never happened. We never even, I think I got a reply back saying it was getting done, but I still don't know to this day what happened with it. I say, so we didn't accept it, and then all of a sudden we were getting a meeting with this lady for the Scottish Legal Complaints, Jane Irvin, and John Swinney at that time was arranging this meeting, and it was, I think it was either the day before the meeting or the day of the meeting, the day before I think it was, and then we got a phone call for John Swinney, and it was a strange one. Turned around and went like that, she's not going to meet you. She didn't want to meet us. And I'm like, well, you're the one that arranged the meeting. You're a government minister. I think you were a deputy first minister. You can make her meet us and explain to us what the breakdown in the investigation is, what is her problem. And he just turned and says, no, I'll meet her. Himself.
Oh,
And in this day, I have no idea what happened with that meeting.
Well, we go through to 14th January 2013. We've got a letter from Russell Dunn, Assistant Chief Constable. So we're pretty high up in the police organisation. Crime in Safer Communities, Strathclyde Police, to John Swinney. Again, John's central.
John Swinney, yeah.
John Swinney is central to all of this. He says, I write in response to your letter to Chief Constable Campbell Corrigan of 20th November 2012. I understand that Detective Inspector James McEnany has been in contact with you and is progressing this investigation. Furthermore, I believe that a meeting has been arranged for the 25th of January whereby Detective Inspector McEnany will meet with both you and your constituent, Mr. John Shields, to discuss this matter. Did that one happen?
That happened in John Swinney's office. Myself, my wife and my sister, we met with this detective, and there was a lady detective, and John Swinney, we sat there, and he just listened to our complaints, what we wanted done, and if I remember right, his statement was, okay, we'll investigate that, we'll be back to you within 4 weeks.
Okay, so the police were investigating. What was John Swinney like during that meeting?
John Swinney, to be honest with you, I knew that John Swinney had already put his bit in because she was there before and had a meeting with him before we even got there. And I could understand for the way this police officer was reacting to me that John Swinney had already told him what he wanted done.
Okay.
I knew that.
Okay. In February 2013, 5th of February, Campbell Corrigan, Chief Constable, Strathclyde Police, to John Swinney MSB, further to that meeting, with my officers from the Public Protection Unit at Saracen Police Office and your constituents, Mr. John Shields. I confirm the police position. I have instructed a full review of the circumstances in an effort to establish any criminality. This inquiry will be progressed by Detective Chief Inspector Gary Thompson, London Road Police Office, who will provide regular updates to Mr. Shields with the progress of the inquiry. I hope these actions address the concerns raised by both yourself and Mr. Shields. Please do not hesitate to contact Detective Chief Inspector Thompson or myself should you wish any further information or wish to discuss any aspect of the matter. So here we've got Chief Constable Corrigan being massively helpful a couple of weeks later. So they've come back and they're now having a proper full investigation, one of many. And again, John Swinney's being central to all of that. Was there any significant progress made due to that investigation?
No, not that I know of. I think the only thing that happened after that was the 4 week period that Detective McEnany had said he would get back to me with an answer, and what had went on was a letter from him telling me, oh, we can't do anything. I think you've seen the letter where it states we can't do nothing because we cannot find any paperwork. Okay,
so that didn't go anywhere because of alleged lack of information. We'll come to that in a moment. So we're now through into June 2014. Now you were fitted up in August 2014. So this is quite adjacent to when it was all kicking off, right? And we still see John Swinney acting very much on your behalf. So there's a letter from him to Sir Stephen House, Chief Constable of Police Scotland. Dear Sir Stephen. So he goes on in his letter, he says, I've advised Mr. Shields to raise with the police the concerns he has about his son's welfare, and I regret to say that Mr. Shields believes that the police handling of this matter has been deeply unsatisfactory. I hosted a discussion in my office with Police Scotland officers and was given assurances that this matter would be timorously investigated. Some months have now passed since that meeting took place, and my constituent has no satisfactory information regarding the progress that has been made by the police in this investigation. So again, that's quite strongly worded in these circles, and it's to the Chief Constable. The 6th of August, so this is, a couple of weeks before they started to take action against you. Letter from Sir Stephen House to John Swinney. Dear Cabinet Secretary, in relation to the alleged assault and abuse against John William Shields Jr., I can confirm a full and thorough investigation under the direction of a detective inspector has been undertaken since January 2013 and has only just been concluded. Okay, so it's interesting to note that this is about stuff that happened in 1995. So 2014, only just been concluded. This is a protracted inquiry, given the need to locate and review a substantial amount of historical documentation from a number of partner agencies. I point out that the partner agencies is a problem, right? And the fact that they view them as partner agencies is a problem, but still, they're saying that it was slow because there was so much information. In addition, numerous potential witnesses and medical practitioners had to be identified, traced and interviewed. Ultimately, there is no evidence to establish that John William Shields was victim of any assault or abuse whilst in the care of the Mallard residential establishment. Mr. Shields Sr. has been fully updated in this regard. Now, we know, and we've covered in the previous programmes, that you consider this unsatisfactory. You were threatening legal action against the police, and that later the fiscal came back and said there was insufficient evidence, not no evidence, because saying there's no evidence is clearly false. And we've covered that in detail. My point here is, even in the 6th of August, there's still action that's coming through Mr. Swinney, and that is, to some extent, holding the authorities to account, or at least forcing them to state their position. Now we get to Tuesday, the 12th of August 2014. John Swinney called Frank Mulholland, Lord Advocate, and he followed up with an email. The email says, I refer to a conversation on Tuesday in which I indicated to you I would write with details of a case of an alleged sexual assault and maltreatment of John William Shields Jr., who's the son of Mr. John Shields, who has drawn the case to my attention. He continues, so this is him writing to the Lord Advocate and really flagging up your case, even though the police have not done the job. He's now flagging up to the Crown Office. He continues, Mr. Shields Sr. believes that the alleged assault took place against his son when his son was a resident of the Mallard Church of Scotland care home in Glasgow in the 1990s. The case has been investigated by the police, but the inquiry has never been to the satisfaction of Mr. Shields Sr. Mr. Shields is particularly concerned that after he and I had engaged with Strathclyde Police on this question, there appeared to be little progress taken towards pursuing the inquiry. I enclose a letter sent to Mr. Shields, beg your pardon, on the 25th of July 2014 by Detective Chief Inspector Sharon McGregor of the Public Protection Unit. This is essentially the latest response from the police and sets out their view that there's no case to answer. Mr. Shields is dissatisfied with this response from the police and is interested to pursue the substance of his concerns about the well-being of his son. Given the clear public interest that has been expressed in interest of historic sexual abuse, I thought it was important that this case was drawn to your attention to provide the Crown Office with the opportunity to investigate the issues that have been raised by my constituent. I think it would be beneficial if a representative of the Crown Office was able to meet with Mr. Shields to listen to his concerns and to view the substantial amount of material he's assembled on this issue in order that my constituent's concerns can be addressed. So he's taking, the police have said there's no case to answer, he's taking this forward to the Crown Office. This is all 2 weeks before Perth and Kinross Council in court trying to remove your son.
Yeah.
Right? Very adjacent. So he writes to you on the 13th of August to say he's done this and he'll get back to you when there's a reply. The 15th of August, 10 days before Perth and Kinross start legal action, which failed to remove your son, he writes to you, Dear John, thank you for visiting my office today with Janice. I was grateful for the opportunity to discuss my contact with the Lord Advocate and attempting to further your case. As I stated when we met, in terms of the complaint about the police handling of your case, you have the option of making a complaint to the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner. I will keep you updated on any further information I receive from the Lord Advocate. As ever, if there's anything further I can do to assist you in the meantime, please let me know. So the paperwork that he's putting down is that this is another meeting which is friendly and positive and supportive and on your side and pushing your case. Is that your recollection of that meeting?
No.
Tell me what happened.
We had to go to Swinney's office. We got a phone call, myself and my wife, in the morning, and John Swinney says, it was early in the morning, and Swinney says, could you come down and see us at the office? So I went like, what for? He says, I want to talk to you about your son's case. So I says, okay, fine. Thinking maybe he's got some information for us. So myself and my wife went down to John Swinney's office. We walked in. John Swinney was sitting there himself. You walk in the fair size wee room, table in the middle. John Swinney's sitting there. He says, have a seat. Sits down and he goes like that to me. I would like you to drop any proceedings concerning your son's case. So I went like that to him. Why? He went like, he says, look, you get a massive care package for John. He says, but how about if I told you that £96,000 you could do with it whatever you want it? You're turning and telling me I can go and do whatever I want with that money? I says, I can't. I says, every month I've got to put books into Perth and Kinross Council. I'm accountable to the Guardianship Office. I'm accountable to the Mental Welfare Commission, and you're telling me to go and spend money and do whatever I want. I says, we can't do that. I says, first of all, it's not my money, that's John's money. That's taxpayers' money that's paying for his care. And you're telling me to go and spend it any way I want. So I knew exactly what he was doing. And I stood up and I says to my wife, I says, come on, let's go out here. And he grabbed my wife by the arm. And he turns around and says to her, make sure that he doesn't speak to the press or anybody about this. And Janice turned and says, I can't stop him. If he wants to go and say what you've done today, he will do it. And he turned around and says to my wife, it's amazing what skeletons will come out the cupboard. And Janice says, we don't have any skeletons. He turned around and he says, they can be made up. And I just turned around and says to her, come on, let's get out of here. And we went out of here. And as I said, for that day onwards, I knew Swinney could not be trusted.
So this is after 2003. So you've had, by this point, 11 years of mostly positive experience with him, and he suddenly turned around and told you to drop your campaign.
Yeah, but if you remember, before that, we were fighting with Perth and Kinross Council to get John's files. And then there was a meeting held in Perth, and we got a breakthrough with Perth and Kinross Council admitting that they knew files existed with John.
So when was this?
Oh, that would be maybe 2-3 months before that. We'd had a meeting in Perth, big meeting in Perth. I had a lot of witnesses that day with us, and we were sitting in there, and we were doing well. My wife managed to get it out of David Burke, sorry, that was his name, David Burke, that they had, in fact, had John's files. Now, these are the files that don't exist. These are the files that nobody's meant to have seen, been destroyed. Here they're sitting in Perth and Kinross all the time. They had them, so they must have looked through them. They admitted that day. Now, we're sitting there, and he's pouring out the fact this file, and then Swinney just went like that. Meeting finished, stopped, boom, that was it. He stopped it. And he says, what we'll do here is, you will put in a request for Perth and Kinross Council to answer 8 questions. 8 questions concerning everything that we're talking about today. I said, fine. So I went home, done the 8 questions, and it was a wee while later. I was
just before we get to that, right? So you were in a meeting, and you had Perth and Kinross Council on the ropes.
Yeah.
They were starting to concede information.
Yeah.
And John Swinney stopped the meeting.
He just stopped it point blank.
Did he ever explain why?
No. I never had any converse with Swinney until he contacted me to come down to the office.
So that wasn't operating in your best interest?
Oh no, definitely not, no.
Okay. Right, so we'll close the meeting down, and you're going to get 8 questions, right? So it's now limited. It's not. This is limiting the exchange, limiting the damage, right? Okay. So you did your 8 questions. What happened then?
I was walking home one day through Blair, and the next minute a car draws up, and out gets John Swinney, And he walks across the road to me. And he says to me, did you get your reply for Perth Cross Council? He says, I've not been home yet. And we went like, well, you'll get one. It's not much of a reply. And I went like, huh? And I just walked along the road, went home, showed myself, letter in. In fact, I don't even think it was posted to me. I think it had actually been dropped through my door. And I opened it up, and these 8 questions that he wanted answered, me to write in to get answer for, he never answered one of them. And then he knew then that I would go for court proceedings.
Okay, so, so he's been supporting you for 11 years. He's sitting there in a meeting with Perth and Ross Council. He says that what's now going to happen is that you're going to list 8 questions in writing and they're going to answer them. You agree, they agree, you do your bit, they don't answer the questions. Logically, Mr. Swinney would be irate and would be berating Perth and Ross Council on your behalf. Is that what happened?
No.
What did he do?
Nothing. I never heard from him again until I got a phone call from him, because he knew then that I was going to start court proceedings. He knew I'd already done court proceedings and won, and he knew I would do it again. And as I said, we received a phone call for him to come and meet him at his office right out of the blue, not expected. I didn't even know that he was going to be writing to Frank Mulholland. I had no idea he was doing that.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things that then happened after that that are in the file. There's a letter from John Walker, PKC Executive Director, Housing and Community Care, to John Swinney. Say, thank you for your inquiry concerning Mr. John Shields. So this is in September. So John Swinney's writing about you at this point, presumably without your knowledge. And John Walker says, throughout the investigations, this is the investigation into you by Perth and Ross Council Social Work Department. Throughout the investigation, Mr. Shields has been and will be advised of due process. And I understand he sought legal advice to ensure he is represented appropriately. There will also be an opportunity for further representation at a multi-agency case conference, which will be arranged in due course. Just while we're on the subject, were you or did you have a representative at any multi-agency case conference? No,
it's like everything to do with us. No, I was never informed about these things. They went on behind. I never even knew Swinney was writing to John Walker, whoever he is. He never ever made himself known to me. I have no idea who he was. You know, like John Swinney, if you remember right, the day I was arrested, he was asked of his involvement, and he turned around and says he wasn't doing nothing. He couldn't interfere because it was a police matter. You know, like, so I have no idea what Swinney's involvement with this man is. What was he doing on my behalf? He never seen me after I'd been arrested, Swinney. The last time I set eyes on John Swinney was the day I walked out his office. The only other time is when he was summoned to go to court, which will come along.
We'll come to that,
We'll come to that early, but as I said, I have no idea why he was involved.
So we've now got, on the 19th of September 2014, there's a letter from the Lord Advocate, Frank Mulholland, in response to Swinney's letter from the August. It says, Dear John, I refer to your letter of 13th of August 2014 concerning an allegation by your constituents, Mr. and Mrs. John Shields, that their son John William Shields Jr. was a victim of sexual assault and maltreatment whilst resident in the Mallard Church of Scotland establishment in Glasgow. And he continues, following receipt of your letter, Police Scotland were instructed to prepare a report on the investigation into Mr. and Mrs. Shields' allegations. Policy Division and Crown Office has received an initial response. However, you'll appreciate that there have been 3 separate police investigations in relation to the allegations by Mr. and Mrs. Shields, and police have considered great volumes of material. So not nothing.
No, man. The materials appeared again. Great
volumes, including witness interviews and medical records. Medical records. Okay. Accordingly, some further we've never actually found out, I digress, but we've never actually found out if they've got information you don't have, because they've kept it secret.
Yeah.
Accordingly, some further, more detailed inquiries needed before I can respond in full. I'm sure you'll appreciate that this will take some time. And he wrote again on the 6th of March to update John Swinney again. And he says, further to the letters of 23rd October, so this is March 2015, further to the letters of 23rd October 2014 and 2nd December 2014, Mr. Stephen McGowan, Procurator Fiscal for Major Crimes and Fatalities, and Ms. Katrina Dalrymple, Head of Policy, have met with your constituents, Mr. and Mrs. Shields. Interestingly, those are both names we know from the Holly Gregg case. It's a small world. Following the meeting on the 12th of February, Mr. McGowan has instructed Detective Chief Superintendent Leslie Bowles, head of the newly formed Child Abuse Investigation Unit in Police Scotland, to conduct further inquiries. Allowing time for the police to conduct further inquiries, which includes obtaining witness statements and reviewing medical and social work evidence, I hope I'll be in a position to update you in further in around 3 months. Okay, so what do you remember about meeting Stephen McGowan and Katrina Dalrymple?
That was a meeting that was held in Dundee. He came up with this woman Dalrymple, and we sat and had a meeting with her. I do remember it, and all that happened there was he was going to go put a team from Livingston Police Station, a new unit that would go and investigate what happened to John, go and investigate all the people that were involved. And to be honest with you, I think it took a year. And as it says, till later on, we had a meeting with McGowan, and I think we've already spoken about what he done. He done absolutely nothing.
On the 1st of June, so 3 months after the previous letter, Frank Mulholland wrote again to John Swinney to give him an update. And he says, further police inquiries are ongoing. Given the volume of material and the complex and sensitive nature of the investigation has taken longer than first anticipated, Mr. Gowan will continue to keep Mr. Shields up to date with progress of those inquiries. Okay, obviously that didn't happen, but there we go. So 2015 is a letter from Frank Mulholland to Mr. Swinney, MSP. Reports now been received from Police Scotland. Advice and instruction are to be sought from an independent Crown Counsel in the Sexual Crime Unit. We're now late 2015, and late 2015 we get to the guardianship hearing, and you wanted Mr. Swinney to appear there as a witness. So tell me about that.
I was going to summon him as a witness in my behalf. As I said, all I wanted him to do was to go up and support me and my son, mostly my son and what had happened to my son, put the court's picture of this is why they were doing this, was to cover up the child abuse. And that's really all I wanted John Swinney to do. And then
So how did he respond?
He wasn't coming. He wasn't coming. He just turned around and blank. That was it. He wasn't coming. He was too busy.
Despite the fact he'd actually written to you previously and offered to be a witness on your behalf.
Yeah, he just wasn't coming. And I says, oh well, he doesn't want to come, so sort that one out. So I just says, okay, I found out. That's when I found out that I was able to get sheriff officers. So I found a place in Perth that done it. And I cited him. So the same day, he phones my house at night, and Janice comes to me and she goes like, I got John Swinney on the phone. I says, good. She says, he's on here and he's going on about, you cited me in the middle of a meeting in Holyrood. And I'm like, brilliant. So he went like that. He's gone like that to her. I didn't want to come. I've got nothing to offer. And I'm doing a budget. So that was that. He didn't want to come at all. He had no intentions. If he'd have got away with it, he wouldn't have came.
This next bit we've actually published previously. The piece is entitled Corrupt Scotland, John Swinney in the Crown Office. Right, and it goes through what happened. Right, and your statement on what happened when the case started was as follows. At the opening of the case in the morning of the 3rd December 2015, Mr. Adam Heath, Solicitor for Perth and Kinross Council, called for a point of order, which was approved by Sheriff Wood. Mr. Heath stated that he had received a phone call from a third party asking him if he could assist in getting one of the witnesses out of giving evidence. When asked who the witness was, he said it was one of the witnesses for the parent attempting to recover the son, one of your witnesses. When asked who the third party was, the solicitor stated that it was the Lord Advocate for Scotland, Mr. Frank Mulholland. Finally, when asked the second time who the witness was, Mr. Heath said it was Mr. John Swinney, Deputy First Minister of Scotland. The sheriff stated that this action would not be allowed in his court, but also prevented the recording of the point of order by the verbatim reporter. So, what did you make of that?
So when the judge was going mental. The judge was standing up there and he's going, this will never happen in my court, and he's banging this, the bow hanged and boom. He says, this will not happen in here, and then he's asking who it was, and I went like, John Swinney? And they went like that, yeah. And the judge went like that, he stopped the case. Stopped it blank, stopped the wee woman that was doing the recording. She wasn't allowed to do nothing, so he went away out and come back in again. Sat back down again. And I went like that, says, he's your witness, Mr. Silsey, you want to know? I said, jail him. And my words to him, jail him. And he turned around and he went like, I think what we'll do is, we'll get Mr. Swinney in first, and we'll get him in, we'll get him out quick. And I'm stunned, absolutely stunned, that he was allowing Swinney to get away with this. This is what I just could, and I found out further in this, if that was me, and I'd approached any of their witnesses, I'd get 25 years. Yeah. Now, Swinney done this, and he was caught. And Adam Heath, I take my hat off to this man, he didn't need to say nothing. But he did. He said it in court, and he just sat down after stating it, and we left it for the courts to deal with us. And Sheriff Woods done nothing. For 1 minute taking a paddy, shouting this will not happen in my court, and then all of a sudden, boom, he disappears away out, and then comes all the way back in, and then he says, we'll get Swinney in first, and we'll get Swinney out quick. I write to the courts, and I report Swinney for what he done, and they wrote back to me, and the words were, oh, it was crazy. It just made me think what Perth Sheriff Court was like. I just went like, he says, he turned up, didn't he? I went like, what? I'm back into court again. I said, what is this? He turned up. I says, he broke the law in there.
Well, a couple of things. This article that I did was published in 2021, 7th of March 2021. I have tweeted it many times to Mr. Swinney. It's been sent to Mr. Swinney. He's never disputed the facts that have been laid down. Okay? He said more than opportunity to dispute it. He hasn't done so. So he agrees that what you've described there is factual. Secondly, the Fresh Start Foundation, operating on your behalf, wrote to Lord Carloway, Lord President of the Court of Session, who's basically in charge of all the judges in Scotland, because the person who did this was Frank Mulholland. And Frank Mulholland, by this point, had gone from being a judge, from being the Lord Advocate to being a judge. So we wrote to him and said, we're duty bound to bring to your attention the most irregular and alarming occurrence which took place in Perth Sheriff Court on the 3rd December 2015 at a hearing in connection with an application for guardianship under section 57(1) of the Adults with Incapacity Scotland Act 2000 by Mr. John Stuart Shields, applicant in respect of Mr. John William Shields. Right, we gave him the court reference and we gave him a full description of what had happened. Right, and we raised certain issues. So therefore, to the best of our knowledge, the following circumstances occurred. Mr. Mulholland, when Lord Advocate, contacted the solicitor for the First Minister in the civil case. He then attempted to alter the witness list for the applicant in this case without that party's knowledge or consent. He therefore seems to have misused the influence granted to him by high office in order to materially affect the conduct of a civil case with which he was wholly unconnected. He seems to have been undertaking this activity in order to satisfy the wishes of a fellow cabinet minister. I then concluded, we therefore bring this sorry matter to your attention so that you may have the unpleasant task of investigating this affair with such rigour that on completion of your work the Scottish people can have no residual doubt concerning their senior judiciary, even when fully appraised of these events. To which we got no reply. So we then got Murdo Fraser, MSP, to write to Lord Carloway and suggest that he might consider replying. And after that, we got a reply. Thank you for your letters of the 17th November and 23rd of January. This came in the 30th of January, 2020. I apologise for the delay in replying. As this concerns events which are alleged to have taken place before Lord Mulholland was appointed as a judge, it is not a matter for the Lord President. And that's it. So we have someone abusing their position, abusing their senior position to influence a case in a court in an underhand manner. And that person is then appointed as a judge in this country. And the response of the man who's actually supervising the ethical conduct of the judges is, well, he did it before he was a judge, so I don't care.
He can do whatever he wants.
So I thought that was a stunning moment in Scottish judicial history.
You've got sorry, David, but you've got to remember as well as reporting this at the time to the courts, actually put a letter into Holyrood and reported Swinney for what he done. Because if I remember right, nobody's above the law. That's what they kept telling me, nobody's above the law. Swinney isn't above the law.
16th of March 2016, letter from the Commissioner for Ethical Standards in Public Life in Scotland to you, entitled Public Standards Code of Conduct for Members of the Scottish Parliament. Complaint, John Swinney, MSP. So this is their response to your complaint. Admissibility of the complaint is determined by reference to 3 tests as put out in Section 6 of the 2002 Act. The first of these is relevancy. There are 3 elements to it. The first and second seem to be satisfied. However, there's an issue with relation to the third, which is as follows. For the purpose of the first test, a complaint is relevant if C, it appears at first sight that if all or part of the conduct complained about is established to have been committed by the member, it might amount to a breach of a relevant provision identified by the Commissioner. It's very vague wording, right? So you can, well, I'm not sure. He continues, the issue is that I'm unable to identify any provision which could have been considered to have been breached in the circumstances set out by your complaint. There's no provision of the Code of Conduct for MSPs which deals with how an MSP should respond to a citation to attend court. I've therefore concluded that your complaint is not relevant in the circumstances. I am required to dismiss this complaint for failing to satisfy the first test. So, because the MSP, just let that sink in, anyone who's watching this, because the MSP's Code of Conduct does not specifically say that if you're cited as a witness, you cannot misuse the office of the Lord the Lord Advocate to try and get you out of appearing in court and therefore interfere with a case in court. Because it doesn't say that in the Code of Conduct, I mean, it doesn't say many other things. It doesn't say, presumably it doesn't say you can't run naked up and down Blairgowrie High Street, right? Presumably that wouldn't be a problem either. Because it doesn't say that, it's somehow not relevant. And this shows how the Code of Conduct is used not to protect the public from misdeeds by the politicians, but to protect the misdeeds of the politicians from the public. It's an astonishing response that isn't an issue for the conduct of MSPs, because that was nobbling a court case.
Yeah.
I'll finish off, and we're kind of at the end of this, and I'll let you have the sort of final word on Mr. Swinney just in a moment. 2017, there's a letter from Wellbeing Scotland to Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister, from the Chief Executive of Wellbeing Scotland. She writes, I'm operating as an independent advocate to Mr. John Shields. I have recently reviewed his file and the evidence of the abuse of his son. there is compelling evidence that Mr. Shields' son experienced childhood abuse whilst in a care setting. Now, I point out this, that anyone who has experience of working with disabled adults, working with disabled children, working with people who have suffered abuse, and the psychological response, see the evidence as compelling. It's only Police Scotland and the various institutions who were responsible for preventing this abuse who can't see it. She sees it as compelling evidence. A fact supported by Mr. Swinney in correspondence. So she recalls that Mr. Swinney said, your son was abused in care. Compelling evidence. Mr. Shields was arrested on spurious charges and with no evidence other than hearsay. His guardianship of his son was then removed. It is my view this was a flawed process that requires further scrutiny, but Mr. Swinney has now distanced himself from the case. As Mr. Shields' MSP, this is of concern. I have to raise concerns about the role of Mr. Swinney in child abuse matters. I raised a whistleblowing complaint with him that was handled very badly. The individuals I complained about had intimidated me on my personal Twitter account, and in the non-independent investigation findings, their defence was that the Deputy First Minister had asked them to do it. I am concerned that the Deputy First Minister would ask civil servants to monitor the private Twitter account of a private individual. My concerns about the government move towards a new way of supporting survivors have been borne out by the significant distress of survivors, and 2 clients have lost their lives through suicide. I am very deeply concerned when Mr. Shields asked me to support him to find that he has been badly let down by Mr. Swinney. On reviewing the full file for Mr. Shields, this reads like a vendetta against him due to his ongoing commitment to his son and the pursuit of the truth. I would welcome an early response to this matter, particularly as your party ignored the previous correspondence I sent. So, that's to Nicola Sturgeon. Do you know what Nicola Sturgeon did with that?
Yeah, she sent a response back, talk to John.
Talk to John. Okay, talk to John Swinney. Okay.
Sent us back to John Swinney.
Now, the last thing I want to raise with you today is your interaction with the Child Abuse Inquiry. You went to Child Abuse Inquiry, you made a long statement, you found that process to be thorough and positive, and you made a statement on behalf of your son about what happened in the Mallard care home. And at that time you had been led to believe that you would be able to speak for your son to the Child Abuse Inquiry. So did that happen?
No.
And were you given any information as to why not?
Yeah, one of the reasons with the Historic Abuse Inquiry that I took part in is that I would be allowed to speak on behalf of John, because John can't speak. And I was promised that this would happen. And eventually I was met in Blairgowrie by 3 members of the Historic Abuse team, and they hired a room from the Royal Hotel, and we met in there, and the lady, they done a statement, the 3 of them done a statement, and it was brilliant. 40-page document was done, and in that they named and shamed, just like we've talked over the last 7 stories, is all included in this statement, and it was brilliantly done. And I says to them, once it was done, you receive a document, gets sent to you, and you sign for it, and that becomes what they call a legal document. It's legal. And that, one of the reasons I done it was that I would be allowed to go up in front of Lady Smith at the Historic Abuse Inquiry and be allowed to speak on behalf of my son. Now 4 years went by, and I learned that there was a problem. So I phoned up the Historic Abuse people and I says, what's happening? And it just so happened it was the same girl who had been involved at my meeting in Blairgowrie. And I says to her, look, 4 years now, I says, I've not even been interviewed, I've not had a contact, I've not nothing. And she went like that, she said, I'm going to be honest with you, John, your son's story will never be seen. I says, what? I says, it'll never be seen. I says, why's that? She says, because of government interference. I says, government interference. I knew right away what she was saying.
Well, who was the government minister responsible?
John Swinney.